Declassified footage from the USS Scorpion has left scientists and naval historians completely stunned. 10,000 feet beneath the Atlantic Ocean, cameras captured something that should not exist. A nuclear submarine shattered into 3 massive sections, its sail torn completely free, its hull telescoped inward by forces so violent that the steel was compressed at over 1,000 miles per hour. The wreckage told a story the United States Navy had spent decades trying to bury, because what those cameras revealed did not match the official explanation. Not even close. And what made it worse was what was still inside. A nuclear reactor and 2 nuclear warheads sitting on the ocean floor, undisturbed for more than half a century. This is the USS Scorpion, a 252-foot skipjack-class nuclear-powered attack submarine that served as one of the most advanced weapons in the United States Navy's Cold War arsenal. Launched in 1959 and commissioned on July 29, 1960, the Scorpion was a revolutionary machine. She combined 2 technological breakthroughs that had never been paired before: nuclear propulsion and a teardrop hull design. The nuclear reactor gave her unlimited range. She could stay submerged for weeks. The teardrop hull allowed her to cut through the water at 33 knots underwater, roughly 38 miles per hour, making her one of the fastest submarines on Earth. She carried Mark 37 acoustic homing torpedoes and 2 Mark 45 nuclear tip torpedoes, each with an 11-kiloton warhead. For context, the bomb dropped on Hiroshima was about 15 kilotons. The Scorpion was not a defensive vessel. She was a hunter. Her mission was to find and destroy Soviet submarines in the deep Atlantic during the most dangerous period of the Cold War. And her story contains a mysterious death that killed 99 men. A government cover-up that may have started within hours of the disaster, a Soviet spy operating at the very heart of Navy communications, and declassified footage from the ocean floor that finally exposed what the Pentagon had been hiding. But to understand what those cameras found, you need to understand what really happened in the spring of 1968. And it begins with the decision that the crew of the Scorpion knew was going to get them killed. By early 1968, the USS Scorpion was falling apart. She had been due for a complete overhaul, a full 9-month teardown and rebuild in February of 1967. But the Navy could not afford to lose one of its nuclear attack submarines during the height of the Cold War and the Vietnam War at the same time. So the full overhaul was canceled. Instead, the Scorpion received only emergency repairs, a patch job that left critical safety systems unaddressed. The sub-safe modifications mandated after the loss of the USS Thresher 5 years earlier, the safety checks specifically designed to prevent another submarine from being crushed by the ocean, were never fully implemented on the Scorpion. Her crew knew it. They had a name for their boat. They called her the USS Scraperon. Electrician's mate Dan Rogers refused to go on the final cruise. He flatly told Commander Francis Slattery that every man on board was in danger. Rogers was removed from the crew roster. He would be one of only 2 men originally assigned to the deployment who did not sail with the Scorpion on her final voyage. The other was dropped off at the naval station in Rota, Spain. One was for a family emergency, and the other was for health reasons. Everyone else stayed aboard. 99 men on a submarine her own crew believed was a death trap. On February 15, 1968, the USS Scorpion departed Norfolk, Virginia for a 3-month Mediterranean deployment. She operated with the 6th Fleet, conducted anti-submarine warfare exercises, and tracked Soviet naval movements across the Mediterranean. The Cold War was at a fever pitch. Just weeks earlier, North Korea had seized the USS Pueblo, an American intelligence ship, capturing its crew and its encryption equipment. That seizure would have consequences no one fully understood at the time. By mid-May, the Scorpion's deployment was complete. She was heading home. Commander Slattery radioed Norfolk on May 21st with an estimated arrival time of 1 in the afternoon on May 27th. The crew was eager to get back. Some had not seen their families in 3 months, but the Scorpion was not going straight home. She had been given one last assignment, and it would change everything. On or around May 20th, the Scorpion received orders to divert roughly 1,200 miles to the southwest to observe a group of Soviet warships operating near the Canary Islands. This was not unusual for a Cold War attack submarine. What was unusual was the context. An Echo II-class Soviet submarine was operating with the flotilla, along with a guided missile destroyer. The American submarine USS Scorpion had just been harassing these same Soviet vessels. And somewhere in the background of all of this was a shadow that would not be fully understood for nearly 2 decades. A Navy warrant officer named John Anthony Walker Jr., who was at that very moment selling America's most closely guarded secrets to the Soviet Union. Walker worked at the Submarine Force Atlantic headquarters in Norfolk. He handled classified message traffic sent to and from submarines at sea. He had access to encryption codes, operational orders, and the movements of every submarine in the Atlantic Fleet. After his arrest in 1985, Walker pleaded guilty to espionage. Investigators determined that the codes he sold, combined with a KW-7 encryption machine captured from the USS Pueblo, gave the Soviets the ability to decode virtually all classified American naval communications. And on the night the Scorpion disappeared, John Walker was the supervisor on duty at the communication center. That fact alone should make your blood run cold. But here is where the story takes a turn that the Navy has never been able to explain. The Scorpion's last confirmed communication was transmitted on May 21st, 1968. She reported her position as roughly 400 miles south of the Azores and confirmed her estimated arrival at Norfolk. After that transmission, the Scorpion was never heard from again. She was supposed to send a routine check report the following day, a 4-word encrypted message that essentially meant situation normal, proceeding as planned. It never came. That night, Radio Man Second Class Mike Hannon was on duty at the Submarine Force Atlantic Message Center in Norfolk. When his shift ended at midnight, the Scorpion's check report had not arrived. Hannon was concerned. He flagged it to his watch supervisor and, to his relief, Radio Man Ken Larbies. Then he went to his barracks to sleep. When Hannon returned to the message center the following morning, May 23, 1968, he walked into a room full of admirals. Senior officers were crowded into the communications center, and what Hannon overheard would haunt him for decades. There were officers openly discussing that they believed the Scorpion had been sunk. Hannon later revealed they referenced the Navy's top-secret sound surveillance system, SOSUS, a network of underwater hydrophones designed to track Soviet submarines. According to Hannon, SOSUS had recorded the Scorpion's destruction. The hydrophones heard the explosion, and a Soviet submarine was tracked, leaving the area at a high rate of speed. Let that sink in. The Navy may have known within hours that the Scorpion was lost. They may have known how, and they may have known who was responsible. But the families of 99 sailors were told nothing. For 5 more days, those families believed their husbands, fathers, and sons were coming home. On May 24th, the Navy publicly announced that the Scorpion would arrive at Norfolk at 1 in the afternoon on May 27th. Family members began planning their welcome. They made banners, they bought balloons, they ironed their best clothes. One crew member's 2-month-old baby girl was dressed in a tiny pink checkered dress with simple embroidery across the front that read, "My heart belongs to Daddy." Another sailor had recently bought an engagement ring for his girlfriend. He planned to propose the moment he stepped off the boat. He would never get the chance to give it to her. On May 27th, Memorial Day, a fierce nor'easter was battering the coast of Virginia. Rain lashed sideways across the naval station. Despite the storm, several dozen families gathered at the foot of Pier 22. They huddled under umbrellas. They sat in cars with the engines running. Children pressed their faces against rain-streaked windows, watching for the dark silhouette of a submarine to emerge from the gray. Astern of the submarine tender USS Orion, a harbor tug idled in the distance. Line handlers stood on the pier, waiting. The 1 o'clock arrival time came and went. 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock. No one told the families anything. Eventually, the commander of a nearby ship invited the cold, wet families to wait aboard his vessel. Hours passed. Most families went home as night fell, confused but not yet afraid. Then, shortly after 6 in the evening, the CBS affiliate in Norfolk broke into regular programming with a news bulletin. The Scorpion was missing. At crew members' homes across Hampton Roads, phones began to ring. The Navy was calling. Then came the telegrams. The Navy Department has, for administrative purposes, placed the personnel aboard the overdue submarine USS Scorpion in a missing status. Teresa Bishop, wife of the Scorpion's chief of the boat, was preparing dinner when her 8-year-old son walked into the kitchen and said there is something on TV about the Scorpion missing. She later recalled going totally numb. That night, she stepped outside into the storm and heard something coming from the naval station 5 miles away. It was the muted chorus of sirens, foghorns, and klaxon alarms as dozens of Atlantic Fleet ships put to sea to search for her husband's submarine. What those families did not know, and what the Navy would not publicly acknowledge for decades, was that the Scorpion had already been on the ocean floor for 5 days by the time they stood on that pier. The submarine had been destroyed at 6:44 in the evening, Greenwich Mean Time, on May 22nd. And the Navy's own hydrophone network had recorded its death in horrifying detail. Military hydrophones stationed near Newfoundland, the Canary Islands, and other locations in the Atlantic captured a sequence of acoustic events that told the story of a submarine in its final moments. First, an explosion. Then 91 seconds of what scientists would later describe as train wreck sounds, a cascading series of 19 separate acoustic pulses as the Scorpion's compartments imploded one by one as she plunged past crushed depth. The entire sequence, from the initial event to the final collapse, lasted 3 minutes and 12 seconds. Analysis of those signals determined that when the hull finally gave way, the implosion compressed the steel at an average velocity exceeding 1,000 miles per hour. The force was estimated at 643 times the force of gravity. The crew would have been killed in microseconds, their bodies incinerated as the air inside the submarine was compressed to incandescence. 99 men were gone in the time it takes to blink. The Navy assembled a court of inquiry in June of 1968. The panel heard testimony from more than 70 witnesses over 11 weeks. But from the very beginning, the investigation appeared designed to arrive at a predetermined conclusion. Vice Admiral Arnold Shada, the commander of Submarine Force Atlantic, the man who had personally selected the Scorpion for the Mediterranean deployment and who had ordered her diversion to spy on the Soviet flotilla, testified that he had no concerns about the submarine until it failed to arrive on May 27th. He made no mention of the missed check report on May 22nd. No mention of the admirals crowding the message center on May 23rd. No mention of SOSUS recordings. No member of the Court of Inquiry challenged his testimony. In January of 1969, the Navy released its findings. The certain cause of the loss of the Scorpion cannot be ascertained from evidence now available. That was the official verdict. No explanation, no accountability, no answers for 64 widows, some of them pregnant, and 99 children who would grow up without fathers. But the evidence was there. It had been there all along. The Navy simply classified it. When documents were partially declassified in 1993, 25 years after the sinking, the public learned for the first time that the Court of Inquiry had actually identified a probable cause. The classified report listed accidents involving the Mark 37 torpedo as 3 of the most likely explanations: a hot-running torpedo, an accidentally launched weapon, or the inadvertent activation of a torpedo by stray voltage. The acoustic homing torpedo, in a ready condition without a propeller guard, could theoretically have started its motor inside the launch tube. Once running, it would have generated extreme heat. If it launched itself, its acoustic guidance system would have searched for the nearest target. In the middle of the open ocean, the nearest target was the Scorpion itself. This theory gained devastating credibility when it was revealed that just weeks before the Scorpion's final voyage, the technical director of the Navy's Weapons Quality Engineering Center had issued an urgent warning. A Mark 46 battery used to power the Mark 37 torpedo had exploded during testing. The alert recommended the immediate withdrawal of all similar batteries from service. The warning stated that sufficient heat was generated to risk warhead cook-off and loss of a submarine. That warning was never acted upon before the Scorpion sailed, but the torpedo theory was not the only explanation, and the alternative was far more disturbing. Ed Offley, a military journalist who spent decades investigating the case, argued in his book Scorpion Down that the submarine was destroyed by Soviet forces. His theory centered on the timing. The Scorpion had been diverted to spy on a Soviet naval group. John Walker's spy ring was actively feeding the Soviets classified American communications. The Soviets had the Pueblo's encryption machine. If Walker provided them with current codes, the Soviets could have known exactly where the Scorpion was, what her mission was, and when she would arrive. Hannon and Larbs, the two radio men who were on duty at the message center, confirmed decades later that officers openly discussed the belief that the Scorpion had been sunk and that a Soviet submarine was tracked, leaving the area at high speed. A former Soviet admiral named Viktor Digallo, interviewed in 1995, stated that the true history of the Scorpion and the Soviet submarine K-129, which sank 2 months before the Scorpion under equally mysterious circumstances, has never been revealed. He said an informal agreement between the two nations' naval commands existed specifically to suppress any further investigation into both losses. He told the interviewer to forget about ever resolving these sad issues for the surviving families. The search for the Scorpion itself became a landmark in the history of mathematics and naval science. Dr. John Craven, the Navy's chief civilian scientist, was tasked with finding a submarine somewhere in a 2,600-mile stretch of open Atlantic. He had almost nothing to work with, no distress call, no witnesses, no clear idea of what had happened. So Craven did something no one expected. He assembled a team of submarine experts, mathematicians, and salvage specialists and asked each of them to independently bet on various scenarios. How fast was the Scorpion traveling when it went down? How steep was its descent? What caused the initial event? The bets were placed as wagers, with bottles of Chivas Regal whiskey as prizes. Craven then took every guess and fed them into a formula called Bayes' theorem, a mathematical method for combining uncertain information to produce a probability estimate. The result was a single point on the map that no individual member of the team had selected. It was the collective judgment of the entire group. 5 months later, the Navy's research vessel USNS Mizar found the Scorpion. The wreck was 220 yards from where Craven's team said it would be. That is roughly 3 submarine lengths. A lone submarine had been lost somewhere in thousands of square miles of open ocean at a depth of 2 miles, and a mathematician with a deck of probability cards had pinpointed it to within a few hundred yards. It remains one of the most remarkable feats of applied mathematics in history. What the cameras found on the ocean floor shook the investigators. The Scorpion had broken into 3 major sections. The bow had plowed a deep trench through the soft sediment of the seabed on impact. The sail, the distinctive fin-shaped tower that houses the periscopes and masts, had been ripped completely free and was lying on its side. The operations compartment, the section of the hull directly beneath the sail, had collapsed inward at what engineers called the king frame, the strongest structural point of the entire submarine. The after sections of the pressure hull had been driven forward, telescoped 56 feet into the rest of the ship by the force of the implosion. One of the running lights was found in the open position, as if the submarine had been on the surface at the time of the initial event, though investigators debated whether the shock of implosion could have knocked it open. The torpedo room, critically, was intact. It had not been destroyed by an internal explosion, but it had flooded and its hatches were open. This was significant because if a torpedo warhead had detonated inside, it would have caused sympathetic detonations of nearby weapons, tearing the entire forward section apart. That did not happen. The torpedo room was damaged only by the crushing pressure of the deep ocean. What this meant was fiercely debated, and it remains debated to this day. Then there was the connection to the Titanic. In 1982, famed oceanographer Robert Ballard approached the Navy seeking funding for a deep-sea expedition to find the wreck of the RMS Titanic. The Navy had a counter-proposal. They would give Ballard the money and the equipment, but first he had to do something for them. He had to secretly survey the wrecks of both the Thresher and the Scorpion and assess the condition of their nuclear reactors and weapons. The mission was classified. The Titanic search would be the cover story. Ballard agreed. In 1985, using the submersible Alvin from the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution, he descended to the Scorpion wreck site and conducted a detailed survey. What he saw disturbed him. He later described the Scorpion as looking as though it had been put through a shredding machine. The images Ballard captured, combined with photographs from the original 1968 search and the Trieste 2 dives in 1969, formed the most complete visual record of the wreck. But the Navy has released almost none of them. To this day, only a handful of photographs have ever been made public. The Scorpion rests at coordinates 32 degrees north, 33 degrees west, roughly 400 miles southwest of the Azores, at a depth of nearly 10,000 feet. She has never been decommissioned. Like all lost submarines, she remains on what the Navy calls eternal patrol. Her nuclear reactor and 2 nuclear warheads are still inside the wreckage. The Navy periodically sends vessels to the site to monitor for radiation leaks and to check whether the wreck has been disturbed. Environmental reports say the nuclear fuel remains intact, and no dangerous levels of radioactivity have been detected outside the hull. The plutonium and uranium cores of the 2 warheads likely corroded into dense, insoluble material shortly after the sinking and settled into the sediment. For now, they are stable, but they are there. 2 nuclear weapons sitting on the floor of the Atlantic Ocean in international waters, 57 years after the submarine that carried them was destroyed under circumstances the United States government has never fully explained. In November of 2012, the United States Submarine Veterans, an organization of more than 13,800 members, formally petitioned the Navy to reopen the investigation into the loss of the Scorpion. They argued that declassified evidence, combined with testimony from witnesses like Hannan and Larbies, warranted a new inquiry. The Navy refused. A private group of family members then announced they would investigate the wreckage themselves since it lies in international waters. But the logistics of reaching a site 2 miles below the surface of the open Atlantic made independent investigation practically impossible. The crew of the Scorpion left behind 64 widows and 99 children. Most of the 12 officers and 87 enlisted men who died were younger than 25. They were sailors from 25 states, Puerto Rico, and the Philippines. Sonar technician First Class Bill Elrod had received devastating news during the deployment. His wife had gone into labor on May 16th, but the baby had died at birth. Elrod never made it home to grieve with her. Petty Officer Second Class Stephen Johnson, from a small town in Iowa, had been writing letters to his 17-year-old sister throughout the deployment, asking about her grades and sharing stories about life under the sea. For Mother's Day, he had asked his wife to send flowers to his mother. The pink phlox was still blooming when the telegram arrived, telling his family he was gone. Barbara Gilliam waited decades for answers about her loved one, Joseph Barr. She told reporters, "I would have given my life for him. I always wanted to think of him on an island somewhere, but I know better." A monument now stands at the foot of Pier 22 in Norfolk, the exact spot where those families waited in the rain for a submarine that was already gone. The Navy holds annual memorial services there. At the 50th anniversary ceremony in 2018, more than 500 family members, friends, and former shipmates gathered. Widows held hands. The Navy's public affairs officer said something that was both true and inadequate. The Navy will never, ever forget the Scorpion. But for the families who still do not know exactly what happened, who have been told for more than 50 years that the certain cause cannot be ascertained, remembering is not the same as knowing. The USS Scorpion did not disappear because of one mistake. She was sent to sea without a proper overhaul on a submarine her own crew called Scraparon. She was diverted to spy on Soviet warships while a known CPY was handling her communications. Her distress was likely detected by the Navy's own listening network within hours, but families were allowed to stand on a pier 5 days later, waiting for men who were already dead. Her court of inquiry was led by the same admiral who had sent her on the mission. The most probable causes were classified for a quarter century. A petition to reopen the case was denied. Key documents remain sealed. 2 nuclear warheads still sit on the ocean floor. The declassified footage from the bottom of the Atlantic did not just find a submarine, it found the evidence of a catastrophe that was preventable, a cover-up that was deliberate, and a mystery that remains unsolved because the only institution with the power to solve it has chosen not to. More than half a century of silence, 99 men, 64 widows, 99 fatherless children, and a shattered hull 2 miles beneath the waves that the Navy calls eternal patrol, but that the families of the lost simply call unanswered. If you found this fascinating, hit subscribe to ChronoFall for more stories like this.